history, there have been few men that have truly earned the honor of being called the Great. Peter the First of Russia is among them. So today, I'm here to inform you about the man's achievements that can still be felt and seen today. We're talking about a man who rose to power out of sheer will and took the country that was by all means still in its dark ages and turned it into the most powerful empire in Europe in only a few decades. Barely in his 20s, Peter took part in one of the greatest embassies of the time, studied from nearly every notable scholar of his age. And once he came back to his first order of business was to culturally revolutionize his people. Peter eventually even succeeded in overseeing the completion of the world's greatest navy. This is the man who has shaped history, whose actions we can still feel the effect of to this very day. So let's begin with the end of his very first military campaign. After a long and mostly unsuccessful war with the Turks, Peter the Great managed to capture the Ottoman-controlled Fort Azov. But as he was seizing this seaport, Peter realized that he couldn't hold up the Ottoman Empire without the aid of any allies. And so, in March 1697, he had organized and sent the Great Embassy to all countries in West Europe to try to make allies and that could help him win the war with the Ottomans. Peter had gathered over 250 of his most respected men and sent them as his representatives through all of Europe. Unbeknownst to the country, though, Peter had disguised himself as a low-ranking officer and slipped away from his country to see to the relation building personally. For the first time in Russian history, had a ruler who left the borders of his own country. Everywhere he went, Peter had not only tried to establish an anti-Ottoman alliance, but he also studied and took notes of how a civilized world ran itself. From metalworking to surgery, Peter attended and watched demonstrations performed by professors. Especially as a lover of the sea, Peter spent a great amount of time, almost 5 months in Holland, in order to learn shipbuilding skills himself, which he would later use to construct the world's most powerful navy. Yet still, on his travels, Peter had managed to meet with many important figures, including King William III, Leopold I, the Holy Roman Emperor, and even granted special access by the Dutch East India Company to take part in creating one of their specially designed ships. And even though his anti-Ottoman mission was eventually a failure, he had succeeded in befriending the Polish Prince Augustus II, which would benefit him in the long run in the subtlest of ways. Peter had even managed to convince several hundred various experts to help him civilize Russia once he came back. And thus, with the knowledge of the West in his hand, Peter had begun to oversee his dream of a civilized Russia fulfilled. After his visit to Europe, Peter made a decision to civilize his country, for he dreamed of creating the world's most powerful empire. However, that wasn't as easy as he had hoped. Even by the end of the 17th century, Europeans considered Russians to be lowly barbarians. They wore simple clothing, they didn't wash themselves, and most of them wore long beards. Most of them didn't even know how to read or write. They celebrated the New Year in September and used the Julian calendar instead of the modern Georgian one. And perhaps the most embarrassing issue Peter had to deal with was the absence of a strong and properly educated regular army, which he desperately needed to keep order and expand his new empire. It was due to his lifestyle and disorganized state of his country that the Europeans called Russians the Muscovy, considered them uncivilized and didn't respect them. Peter the Great changed all that when he slammed the door in Muscovy and entered a new age, as historian Lever put it. His embassy into Europe gave Peter enough knowledge about the civilized lifestyle to make Russia great. His goal was to form a country of his dreams, even though many Russians were hostile to foreign ideas and even considered foreigners to be unclean. Some of the Russian Tsars dressed their children in European fashions, bought foreign books, hired European teachers, and imported foreign artists. Nevertheless, these activities were restricted to the very few elite people before Peter ruled the country. And it was due to this internal opposition that it took Peter his entire life to westernize his country, as said by Northrop, another historian. Peter needed to establish a powerful military as well. During his reign, as Ferrero, a military historian, put it, Russia created an army formidable in its size of that period, consisting of 200,000 men, modeled after the European armies. It was hard for the Russian people to accept Peter's reforms. The commoners even suspected that on his embassy, the Europeans had killed the real Tsar and put an impostor in his place who wanted to destroy the country from within. However, Peter didn't care about his own people's opinion, for he knew they were stubborn and conservative. He started reforms forbidding people to wear long beards, for all people except monks or those who paid a ridiculously big tax. Our lords had to wear European clothes and teach their children how to read and write. People must have to wash themselves at least twice a week and clean their teeth every day. Peter thought it was stupid to have a different calendar than the rest of the world did. So he commanded to change it to the common Gregorian calendar, which funnily enough is still not accepted by the Russian Orthodox Church to this very day. And thus, he had set himself a goal of a greater Russia, and he did everything in his power to reach it. And that meant he had to go to war. For most of his reign, however, Peter was a war, for only through war could he gain access to the sea. Access which would allow him to build his navy and establish overseas trade that would make Russia a great nation, as was noted by a Russian historian Childress. Peter wanted to take control of the Baltic Sea in the north and the Azov Sea in the south. And although it was a childhood dream to build a powerful navy, he knew that beneath those desires lay a real strong reason that Russia needed to control the trade in the area, and for the empire needed the trade that the sea had brought with it. But for that, another war had to be declared, and this time it was on the Swedish, for they held the lands that opened up to the Baltic Sea, lands that were once Russia's domain. The Great Northern War was started in the 1700s and ended in 1718 with the Polish withdrawal and the costly yet significant Russian victory. Peter had succeeded in creating a professional army that was able to defeat the Swedish Empire forces, whom most in Europe considered to be the most powerful military of the time. And yet, this was possible due to his Polish friend, Prince Augustus II, who was able to hold the Swedish forces at bay for so long. Without his aid, Peter may have never had enough time to create the professional army that he so desperately needed, and finally take back the desired opening to the Baltic Sea, and establish Russia as the most powerful East European country, and himself the emperor. Peter the Great is a unique individual who shaped the world and history itself in his own image. His tale proves that there is always hope in determination, that even the most unorganized and barbaric countries could be turned into one of the world's most powerful empires. He's the living testament that anyone can achieve great heights. For a man who suffered from anxiety attacks, couldn't write properly his entire life, and never received a proper princely education, he was able to learn from cultures to enhance his own. As far as I know, he's the only individual who changed an entire medieval-esque country of simple lords and kings into a world power in less than 40 years. In creating a powerful army and a navy that could protect his citizens and opening the doors to Europe for his people, Peter solidified his mark in history forever.